Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go over the lesson plan. I'm going to record this in sections so that you can access it because I've looked at a couple of lessons and some folks are still missing the mark. So I want to make sure that you have clear instructions that you can reference. So first part of the lesson plan, with the exception of the date of the field placement, you're going to fill all of this out. Your name, the age and grades of the students. Remember, I told you you need to have one student that either has an IEP or who is an ELL, because you're going to have those students in your classroom. And I want you to address how you're using technology to address, to accommodate, to differentiate, to meet the needs of at least one of these groups of students. Next section is student characteristics. Notice what this says. Identify your student's background, including information such as unique learning needs, culture, interests, and language proficiency. Okay, so this first one, okay, unique learning needs. This would be your students with an IEP. They don't even have to have an IEP. They may have a 504. They don't even need to have that. Maybe it's just, you're going to have lots of students in your class for whatever reason who have learning differences, who do not have, accommodations through an IEP or 504. But this is where you would address them. So you may say in your classroom, I have a student in my class who has an IEP for ADD, and I am using technology in my lesson to accommodate this student by doing X, right? When we talk about culture, typically we talk about like culturally relevant, responsive pedagogy. What we're looking for here is, what I typically look for is the digital divide, where you're going to talk about the digital divide, okay? And we know that students of color, we know students with low SES, we know students who are in urban and rural areas are less digitally literate than their more suburban, affluent peers, right? So how are you using technology in this lesson to make sure that it's accessible and are cognizant of the fact that these students may not be digitally literate, and that they need to build those skills, right? They need to be using technologies as producers so that they're not falling prey to what the literature refers to as double jeopardy, where they're not getting the tech skills they need at home and they're not getting the tech skills they need at school, and they're not developing that digital literacy. Okay, so how are you using technology to meet the needs of those students? Language proficiency, how are you using technology, to meet to help those students? Like, are you allowing them to use translations feature? Are you using translation features to translate, documents that you're handing out, whatever the case may be? But you're talking about in this section, what are the student characteristics in your class, and how is your use of technology helping those students, addressing the characteristics of those students? Next section, learning environment. Describe the learning theory or brain research, okay, that's evident in the field placement classroom, blah, blah, blah. Okay, for here, what we're talking about is, how is your use of technology supporting the learning theory that is sort of the foundation of your lesson? And the example I keep giving that is if you're a constructivist, right, and you think that students build knowledge through experience and they build knowledge, by connecting new knowledge to old knowledge. I personally am a social constructivist, where I think that students should work collaboratively, right? So they should make meaning through language, where they're talking, to one another about what the right answer is, or what they think the answer is to the question that you've posed. And then they're kind of negotiating meaning through that. Okay, so maybe I'm using a Google document, and they're putting their answer on this Google document, right? Maybe I've just used, Kahoot to ask them a question, and now I've asked them to turn to their elbow buddy and discuss the answer that they gave, and then I give them the same question again and see how their answers change. Nonetheless, you have to talk about in this section how your use of technology is supporting, right, that learning theory. Okay, that's what you have to do. Next section that we're looking at, let me take the highlight off here. The next section that we're looking at is, so we can see which one's highlighted. The next section is B, provide a rationale that your lesson is fostering an understanding and respect for diversity. And again, here we might talk about culturally relevant pedagogy, but we haven't really talked about that yet, and we're really interested in technology. So how is your use of technology respecting diversity and fostering respect for diversity? And this is a great place to talk about UDL, right? And because what we're talking about here is diverse learners, right? And so how are you using technology to present information, to engage students, and to allow students to demonstrate understanding in your lesson, which is, and specifically, diverse students? Okay, that's what you want to talk about here. Next section, classroom management strategies. What I'm looking for here is, how is your use of technology either supporting or hindering classroom management, right? So this could be, you're using ClassDojo, which is a technology that is specifically designed for classroom management. Maybe you're using GoGuarding, which is another technology for that. Maybe you start your lesson by saying, I want to remind everybody about our discussion earlier in the semester on digital citizenship. I want to remind you to be good digital citizenships while we're using our Chromebooks and we're using these technologies. Maybe your use of technology is, the research shows that it is engaging and motivating, increasing engagement and motivation of students. Therefore, their likelihood that they're going to be off task and creating behavior management issues is going to be reduced through your technology use, right? But that's what, and you're going to talk about the specific technology you're using to do that, right? So you're using Kahoot. We're not reading an article that I typically give you by Wang, but Wang was the researcher, and he did a study on use of Kahoot and found that the students' engagement and motivation was increased. And if that's the case, then we know that their behavior problems are going to go down, right? So that's what we're looking for here. And I'm going to stop this video here, and then I'll make a second one that gets into the planning and preparation section.